The warmest of greetings to you, and welcome to Happily Ever Teaching. In this podcast, we help you enthrall your learners in every subject under the sun using the best teaching method known to science, storytelling. To do this, we feature special guest educators who are passionately keen for your children to become amazing and successful human beings. I am storyteller Chip Cahoon, and with me this week is...
I'm Toria Bono. I am a primary teacher in a junior school on the South Coast, and I'm also the host of the podcast Tiny Voice Talks. Lovely to be here.
Hi, I'm Helen. I'm a teacher in Buckinghamshire, currently teaching reception and Year 1 children.
And today we are exploring learning outcomes in music, design and technology with this week's folktale from Colombia. You can listen to the story by downloading our sister podcast, Fables and Fairy Tales, or search our website, epictales.co.uk, for Basket Babies. There you'll find a video of me telling the story that you can share with your children. And if you sign up as an Epic Educator, you'll also get a copy as an ebook or paperback, as well as the full audiobook for you to download at any time. There are even some tips for telling the story yourself there, and a whole heap of resources to go with the lesson ideas we're about to discuss, as well as any extra lesson ideas that we didn't have time to fit in this podcast. Right now, though, let's conclude our discussion with Toria and Helen and our Colombian basket babies today. And yesterday, we sort of explored art with a little bit of a DT mindset. And, you had picked up some other design and technology within this story, hadn't you, Helen, for ages 4 to 7? So could I start by turning to you and asking you to unpack those for us?
Yes, of course. My ideas for DT came from near the beginning of the story when the sisters are granted these wishes. And the first two sisters, the first one, which is for a husband who is a builder to build the finest house. And the second sister, which is for a husband who's a fisherman so she can have the finest meal.
Yes.
And I like those ideas because I thought, actually, if you've wished for them, then really, if your wish is going to come true, they really should be the finest that the wishes can bring, and that could be different to everyone's imagination. I thought a couple of nice DT projects would be to design and make these finest things. So beginning with the finest house for children to design what they think the finest house would be like. And it'd be a great opportunity for them to learn a little bit about different homes, whether it's different homes that people live in within their own country, or whether it's different homes that people live in Colombia or somewhere else, for children to learn about some of the different homes and what they look like and what might be inside them and what would the outside look like and what different features would they have. So then they've done their research because their design brief is to create the finest house. And then they decide what components go into making the finest house. What's it going to need? Yeah. So there you've got their design brief. The children design their house and labeling the materials they're going to use to make it with. And that would be the materials limited to what you've got. If you actually want the children to build the house, of course, you're going to limit it to what you've got for them to build it from in your classroom. And then they can build the house. And a really good way to do this with younger children is use cereal boxes as the base and then add different materials. There's lots of skills there around cutting to the right size, joining materials. You can do little skills like hinges on doors, add windows that open and close using maybe a slider mechanism and things like that. So I thought that'd be a great project for the children to design the finest house. And make the finest house. And then, they can begin to evaluate, in Key Stage 1, begin to evaluate their house. And it very much starts with, I've done this with reception children, and it very much starts with, yep, everything is brilliant. And to me, that's fine because, they're just they love their work and they're proud of their work. And then as you get into, Key Stage 1, and you can start it in reception as well, start them to actually think about what is it that's brilliant. So even if they don't want to identify improvements yet, which again, I think is fine, you can say, what is it that's brilliant? Not just it's brilliant, what have you done well?
Yeah.
And they can talk about, actually, we've really joined this well, or we've presented it well, or the hinge works well. So you get into the bottom of what has worked well. And then, of course, at some point introduce, they might start to think about, actually, this didn't go as well as I thought. That's not the finest swimming pool in the house. Those kind of things. And then linked to that is if the children could wish for the most delicious meal, what would they wish for? So you could look at the idea of a 3-course menu there and look at what they might have, starters and desserts and mains. And again, they design it would have to be a simple 3-course meal, unless you've got a lot of time and amazing cooking facilities and many adults to produce a 3-course meal with young children. But it'd be great for them to actually get involved in making a 3-course meal together and sitting down and eating it and deciding what they...
In their finest houses.
In their finest houses, of course, with their finest clothes and their finest pets.
Would you link any of these to some of the other topics you've hinted at over the last couple of weeks? So I was thinking, when you were talking about what makes the finest house, and you'd already described maybe making a river down your classroom, would picking the location of the house be an important consideration, and also designing your house around that location? So if you're close to the river, obviously you're going to have to worry a little bit more about flood defences, maybe.
That's a brilliant geography link. I've done this before with castles, the locations of castles, and why you would put a castle in a certain location. So absolutely, you could have a map, another opportunity for maps. Can you hear that? I've set my chimes off with my enthusiasm.
So excited!
So excited I've set my chimes off. So you can have a map. I won't hit the chimes again, of the Colombian area. And you could decide actually what the best location for the finest house, not near any crocodile nests.
No, and picking up on some of the other Colombian links as well. I mean, obviously in the story that the marmalade bushes are very prominent.
Oh, yes,
and I have done my research since Rob brought these up. They are definitely not bushes that we make marmalade from. They are definitely called that because of the colour of them.
Right.
And I think, in fact, they are also sometimes called fire bushes because of the colours. That's going to come into designing your garden. That's going to come into designing your house, maybe. But I think as well,
links.
just riffing off what you were saying there, Helen, the finest house in the kingdom in the story is described as the palace. So this could be a launch into designing your castle and thinking whereabouts it's going to be, especially if it is a Colombian version.
There you go. That's a good week's worth of work, I think, right there.
So a good term's worth if you include all those other topics, yeah. And if you have those chimes to whack whenever you get excited about your learning, you can introduce Toria's topic for ages 7 to 11 of music.
Yeah. So I don't know if you knew this, but Colombia is known as the land of 1,000 rhythms.
I
did not know that.
Did you not know that?
Rhythms.
Oh, there you go, people. It actually holds over 1,025 folk rhythms.
Wow.
So I know.
Who has counted them?
So the musical Colombia, absolutely. It's an expression of Colombian culture. And it's both traditional and modern. And basically, it's all to do with the geographic region, because it's got loads of different styles, because it's got American, African, European, so many different influences, which is why it's incredibly diverse. So it's diverse from region to region. You'll have some similarities, but you'll also have quite a lot of difference between regions. And I just think it's be really interesting for children to begin to recognize the similarities of rhythms, the differences in rhythms that are holding between region to region. I think it's a really lovely, rich musical topic looking at the music of Colombia.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds fascinating.
And it makes sense when you look at it geographically. It makes sense that it has so many different influences. But I thought that was fascinating about it having 1,025 folk rhythms. And actually, can the children begin to pick those out when they're listening to music?
And what I love about that idea is that, again, you're combining the topics, really, aren't you? And looking at how geography influences the art of a region. And we know that it influences the science of a region, the evolution, the variation, etc. But yeah, it also influences the design of our houses and the patterns in our music. So that's a fantastic way of combining all of these different topics.
Yeah, you could extend it on by basically, if they've identified certain folk rhythms, they could then begin to compose their own music using those rhythms. So I think there's a lot to it, so actually they're beginning to understand what makes Colombian music. They're beginning to recognize those rhythms, but then they're beginning to utilize those within their own compositions.
And, just taking it back to the early years, a musical skill simply copying rhythms, isn't it? So
yes, it is.
Picking out a few of the rhythms and teaching it to the children and getting them to clap it or play it on a percussion instrument would be a great place to start with the Colombian music.
Excellent. Yeah. Just out of interest, when you ask your children to compose in a style that is maybe completely new to them, do you sort of total original free rein with that, or do you encourage them to maybe take a song that they already know and adapt it to that style?
I think with this, it would be because it's very, very much rhythm based. You're giving them that rhythm. You've identified this rhythm. This is the rhythm I want you to stick to.
Yeah.
And actually, at that point, they can then develop. And it might be that they just do something that is purely percussive. It might be that they do something that actually incorporates melody as well. But actually, you're really focusing heavily on the rhythm because that is what makes Colombian music.
Gotcha.
And I think that's the thing to really emphasize with the children, that actually, yes, you're giving them free rein, but this is the rhythm, people.
Yeah, music doesn't have to be melodic necessarily. Yeah.
No, and I think that's what, again, really important to emphasize with children, that it doesn't need to be melodic. It can just be percussive, and it can just, and children love that. Children love just hitting things.
Absolutely.
My children always laugh because on a Thursday, the year sixes come around to announce percussion club. And my children always say, Mrs. Bono doesn't call it percussion club. Mrs. Bono calls it banging things club. Because fundamentally, that's what you're doing.
Absolutely.
And actually, children are much more interested in going to percussion club when they know they're just going to be hitting something. So actually, rhythms are a great thing to get children engaged with music.
Yes.
And the other thing with rhythm is, if you look at success and failure, often children will fear failure if you're asking them to incorporate melody into music. But if you're merely looking at, the rhythm and something percussive, they're less fearful about failing.
Yeah.
It's true.
Everyone can clap. Everyone can hit things.
It's the most primal form of music there is, isn't it? So you're literally developing it in the way that the human race probably develops that instinct. Did you have anything else for early years music, Helen?
Yeah, I had just a very brief thought. It's about the singing. So gone from percussion to singing. Singing the fortune. And I thought it'd be just a simple idea is children can be taught to sing. So there's some rhymes in the story that the bird sings. And I thought it'd be great to teach children to sing those rhymes. And you could probably put them to just a well-known tune, because just getting children singing to well-known tunes is a good start. Or if you were a particularly musical teacher, you could make up a tune yourself or make up a tune with the children, and then they could learn those songs and learn them to perform and enjoy singing them. We all like singing in classes.
Fantastic. Yeah. And again, it's sort of going back to how music may have even developed, because we've got the banging things that Toria's pointed to, but of course birds sing.
Yeah.
And I guess at some point humans decided they wanted to try emulating what the birds were doing. So yeah, some great opportunities here to enhance the creativity of your children. That's all we have time for in this episode, folks, and indeed this story. We'd love to hear your thoughts on everything we've discussed in this podcast, so please find us on social media using @TeachHappily, or leave us a review using your favorite podcast app. You can also use social media to let us know if there's a subject you are soon to teach that you'd like us to cover, as we'd love to help. Please also share this podcast with your colleagues and help us start a story-led revolution in classrooms around the world, so children everywhere can learn in a way that's effective, memorable, and enjoyable all at the same time. We'll be back next week to explore how a certain mermaid from the mind of Hans Christian Andersen can help your young learners grow their academic excellence. And our adaptation of the tale is particularly potent for one prominent component of punctuation. But right now, it only remains for us to say cheerio, and we hope to hear your story soon. So, cheerio!
And we hope to hear your story soon.